The house was too quiet in a way I hadn't expected. I'd been prepared for grief. 41 years of marriage, you think you know what loss will feel like. You picture it as a wave, something that hits and recedes. What I wasn't prepared for was the silence between things, the coffee maker running without anyone asking me to turn it down, the morning paper sitting on the porch because nobody reminded me to bring it in. My wife, Loretta, had died on a Tuesday, pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end, which the doctors called fast, in a way that was supposed to be merciful. I suppose it was. I suppose I was grateful, in those first numb days, that she hadn't suffered longer. That was the thing I kept telling myself at the funeral, when people squeezed my arm and said she was at peace. What I didn't tell anyone was that she had left me a letter. She pressed it into my hands the morning of her last good day, when she could still sit up and hold a coffee cup and look out the window at the yard she'd planted herself 30 years ago. She said, "Don't open it until you need to." I'd almost laughed, almost asked her how I would know when that was. But I looked at her face and I didn't ask anything at all. I just took the envelope and put it in the drawer of my nightstand, under a watch I never wore anymore. That was 8 days before she died. Our daughter, our only child, came down from Columbus for the funeral. She'd driven down with her husband, a man named Prescott who sold commercial real estate and had opinions about wine that he shared without being asked. They arrived the evening before the service, and I held my daughter in the doorway for a long time. She was crying. I was crying. I thought, in that moment, that we would get through it together. I should have paid closer attention to what came after. The reception was held at the house after the burial. Neighbors, colleagues, people from the church Loretta had attended for 20 years. I stood in the living room and shook hands, and accepted roles, and tried to remember names. At some point, I drifted toward the kitchen to get a glass of water, and I heard my daughter and her husband talking in the hallway that leads to the back bedroom. I wasn't trying to listen. I stopped because I heard my name. "He'll be rattling around in here alone," Prescott said. "It makes no sense. This house is too much for one person." "I know," my daughter said, "and technically it's mine." I stood very still. "Your mother bought it before they got married," she said. "The deed was in her name." I checked. I set the glass down on the counter without filling it. I walked back into the living room. I smiled at the pastor's wife, who was telling me something about a prayer circle. I nodded. "I don't remember a word," she said. "Technically, it's mine. I'd lived in that house for 38 years. I'd painted every room at least twice. I'd built the deck in the backyard with my own hands over 3 weekends one summer. Loretta standing at the sliding door with lemonade, pretending she wasn't supervising. I had replaced the water heater and the furnace and a section of the roof after a bad hailstorm in 2011. My name was not on the deed because when we married, Loretta said it was simpler to leave it as it was. And I had agreed without a second thought because I was 31 years old. And we were in love, and it had never once occurred to me that it would matter. My daughter came to me 4 days after the funeral. Prescott stood slightly behind her in the way he always did when he wanted to seem like he wasn't involved. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk about the house." She was gentle about it at first. She framed it as concern for me. Too big, too many stairs, too many memories. She said a smaller place would be healthier. She said they'd already looked at a few apartments not far away, nice ones, and that they would help me move. She said it with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone who is struggling to understand. I asked her what she was saying. Exactly. She took a breath. "The house belongs to me, Dad. It was Mom's before the marriage, and without a will." She stopped. "We checked." The estate attorney confirmed it. "Without a will," I repeated. "Mom didn't leave one." I thought about the letter in the nightstand. I thought about Loretta's handwriting on the envelope, the particular way she wrote my name. I didn't say anything about it. "I think it's best," my daughter said. "If you're moved out within the month, we want to be fair. We'll cover the first 3 months of rent wherever you land." She said this like it was generous. Prescott nodded along like it was reasonable. I sat at my own kitchen table, the table I'd eaten breakfast at for 38 years, and I looked at my daughter's face and I thought, "I do not know who you are right now." But I kept that thought to myself. I told them I would need some time to process things. My daughter said she understood. She hugged me before they left that evening. Standing at the door, watching their car back down the driveway, I had the strangest sensation that Loretta was standing beside me. Not a ghost, nothing like that. More like a warmth at my shoulder. The way she used to stand when we watched people leave after a party. I went upstairs. I opened the nightstand. I took out the envelope. Her handwriting was steady. She'd written my name, just my first name, Walter, in the center of the envelope, the way she always addressed things to me. No flourishes, just my name, clear and certain. Inside were 4 pages, folded in thirds. She wrote the way she talked. Direct, occasionally funny, and always 10 steps ahead of everyone in the room. The first page was personal. Things she wanted me to remember. Things she was grateful for. A particular Sunday in 1987 that I had forgotten and she had not. I won't share all of it. Some of it belongs only to me. But midway through the second page, the letter changed. I know you'll think I was overreacting, she wrote. You always gave her more credit than I did. That's one of the things I love about you. You see people at their best. But I've been watching our daughter for a long time, and I watched her husband even longer, and I need you to not be blindsided. The house deed is in my name. You know that. What you don't know is that I spent the last several months making sure that wouldn't be a problem. I contacted an attorney in February. She came to the house. You were at your Thursday golf game, and I signed documents that transfer the deed to you upon my death. Survivorship deed. It's already filed with the county recorder. The house is yours, Walter. It has been legally since March 7th. There's more. She went on for another 2 pages. The investments she'd inherited from her father. I had known they existed, but I had never known the full amount, because Loretta was private about money in the way her generation often was. What I hadn't known was that she had spent the last year restructuring them, moving accounts, updating beneficiary designations. She listed the institutions, the account numbers, the name of the financial advisor I should call. She listed the name of the attorney. She listed a document storage box at a bank branch downtown, and the key was taped to the inside back cover of a book on the 3rd shelf of the bedroom bookcase. The one you always said you'd read someday, she wrote. You never did, which is why I knew it was safe there. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after I finished reading. Loretta had known. She'd seen it coming. The entitlement, the calculations behind our daughter's eyes, the way Prescott had started asking about the portfolio at family dinners over the past couple of years. She had spent her final months not just dying, but quietly, methodically making sure I would be protected. She had done it without telling me because she knew I would have argued. She knew I would have said she was being too hard on our daughter. She was, as she had been for 41 years, right about everything. I did not call my daughter that night. I went to sleep with the letter on the pillow beside me. In the morning, I called the attorney. Her name was Carolyn, and she was brisk in the way that good attorneys are brisk. No small talk, no wasted words, but not unkind. She confirmed everything in the letter. The survivorship deed had been filed and was fully legal. The accounts had been updated. There was, in the safety deposit box, a document that Loretta had prepared and notarized, a letter of instruction that made her intentions clear regarding the distribution of her estate, signed in front of 2 witnesses, dated 3 weeks before her death. It was not a formal will, but combined with the deed transfer and the beneficiary designations, it rendered the question of inheritance largely settled. Your daughter has no legal claim to the property, Carolyn said. The deed transfer is clean. The accounts bypass probate entirely. If she pursues this, she'll lose. She doesn't know any of this yet, I said. That's your choice to make, she said. I told her I'd be in touch. I thanked her. I sat for a while longer. My daughter called that afternoon. She said she'd been speaking with their estate attorney, a man named something I didn't catch, and that they were prepared to move forward with the process. She asked if I'd started looking at apartments. She kept her voice kind, which was somehow harder to listen to than anger would have been. I've been looking into a few things on my end, I told her. She paused. What kind of things? Just some questions I ain't answers to. Another pause. Dad, I know this is hard, but the sooner we can get this sorted out, the better it'll be for everyone. I didn't argue. I said I understood. I told her I'd be in touch. That week I drove downtown and retrieved the safety deposit box. I sat in a small room at the bank and opened it across a table, and I read every document inside. Loretta had organized them with labeled tabs, in chronological order, with a typed index sheet on top. I don't know why that detail undid me more than almost anything else. The index sheet, the tabs, her planning so careful and so thorough that it looked, sitting there in that box, less like dying and more like departure. She had also, I discovered, owned a second property. This I genuinely had not known. Not the full picture, anyway. I had known, vaguely, that her father had left her something in the Carolinas. She'd mentioned it once, years ago, and I'd assumed it was a small parcel of land, the kind of thing that sits dormant for decades and becomes a minor headache for the next generation. What I found in the box was a deed to a waterfront property on the South Carolina coast, updated in 2021 with my name added as joint owner. The property had been assessed, most recently, at just under $2 million. Loretta had gone to South Carolina in the spring of 2021 for what she told me was a trip to visit an old college friend. She had come home tanned and cheerful and brought me a bag of pralines from a shop in Charleston. I had eaten the pralines and asked how Margaret was doing and not thought anything more about it. She had been adding my name to a deed. I went home and walked through the house slowly, room by room, the way you do when you're trying to hold something steady inside yourself. The kitchen where she'd made every Thanksgiving meal I could remember. The back hallway where we'd hung photographs in mismatched frames, because she said matching frames looked like a hotel. The bedroom where she'd pressed an envelope into my hands and said, "Don't open it until you need to." I sat down at the kitchen table and I thought about my daughter. Not with anger exactly, more with a sorrow I didn't quite know what to do with. I thought about the little girl who used to sit in this same kitchen doing homework while Loretta made dinner. I thought about her wedding day, how she'd been nervous in a way she'd tried to hide and I'd seen through immediately, because she has never been able to hide anything from me. Not really, even when she thought she could. I thought about how Prescott had started to change things, not all at once, nothing dramatic, but gradually, the way water changes stone. I wondered when my daughter had stopped being my daughter and started being something else. I didn't have an answer. I still don't, entirely. What I did that Thursday was call my daughter and tell her I wanted to meet for dinner. Just the two of us, I said, without Prescott. She hesitated. I heard it, but she agreed. We met at a restaurant near her hotel. She'd been staying in town to help with arrangements, which I now understood meant something different than what I'd originally assumed. She looked tired. I noticed that and felt a complicated kind of sympathy. We ordered. We talked about small things for a while. Then she put her fork down and said, "Dad, what's going on? You've been strange this week." "I've been grieving," I said. I know that, but something else is going on." I looked at her for a moment. She looked back at me with her mother's eyes, the exact same shape, the same color, a detail that has always moved me and moved me even then. "Your mother left me a letter," I said. She went very still. I told her what was in it, not all of it, not the personal parts, not the parts that were mine, but I told her about the deed, about the accounts, about the safety deposit box and what was in it, about South Carolina. She didn't speak for a long time. Outside, the restaurant was full and noisy in the way restaurants are on Thursday evenings. "She knew," my daughter said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "She knew." My daughter looked down at the table. Something moved across her face that I couldn't read. It might have been shame. It might have been grief. It might have been something in between. "Prescott said." She started. "I know what Prescott said," I told her. "I heard you in the hallway the day of the reception." She closed her eyes. "She was my wife," I said. "For 41 years she was my home. I built that deck in the backyard. I painted that kitchen 3 times. I'm not going anywhere." My daughter didn't say anything. She picked up her water glass and set it down again. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "I don't know how to explain what happened," she said. "You don't need to explain it tonight," I told her. "But at some point, you're going to have to." We didn't resolve anything that evening. There wasn't a scene. She didn't rage or argue or deny things. She mostly looked like someone who had walked into a room and found that the furniture had been rearranged and wasn't sure anymore where anything was. I recognized the look because I'd been wearing it for 2 weeks. We hugged in the parking lot. I drove home. The following weeks were strange. Prescott called twice, and I let it go to voicemail. My daughter called more frequently, and those conversations were halting, tentative. The conversations of people learning how to be in the same room again after a bad storm. I didn't rush it. Loretta had always been more patient with our daughter than I'd had the temperament to be. and I was trying, in her absence, to borrow some of that. The estate settled the way Carolyn said it would. The deed transfer was uncontested because there was nothing to contest. It was already done, already filed, already legal. The accounts were retitled. I received, in the space of about 6 weeks, a full accounting of what Loretta had built and protected over the course of her life, and what she had left to me. The investments her father had left her amounted, with decades of management, to just over $18 million. I sat with that number for a long time before it became real. I had known Loretta came from money. I had known her father had been successful in a general way, but she had been so ordinary about it, so careful, so private, so genuinely uninterested in wealth as a marker of who she was, that I had never understood the scale of it. She drove a sensible car and bought clothes on sale and cared about her garden. She tipped well at restaurants, because she'd waitressed into college and never forgot it. She had kept $18 million in accounts I hadn't thought to ask about, because it had never occurred to me that she was keeping anything. She had also, I later found out, paid for my retirement accounts to be maxed out every year for the last decade, quietly, as an automatic transfer from an account in her name to one I thought was funded by my own contributions. I had been a high school history teacher for 34 years. I had retired with what I'd thought was a modest but sufficient nest egg. I had been, without knowing it, quietly taken care of. I thought about that for a long time. In the spring, 6 months after the funeral, my daughter came over for dinner. She came alone. She walked through the door and looked at the house the way you look at something you almost lost, with a kind of careful attention. We made dinner together, the two of us, and we ate at the kitchen table. She told me she and Prescott were working through some things. She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. She told me she was sorry. She looked at me when she said it, straight on, without qualification or caveat. I had not been sure she would get there. I had hoped, but I had not been sure. Your mother would have told you that Sarch hasn't cost you anything, I said, and she would have meant it as a compliment. My daughter laughed, a real laugh, a small one. That sounds like her. It does, I said. After dinner, we sat on the back deck for a while. The yard was coming up the way it always does in April, the perennials Loretta, planted coming back, without being asked, the way they always do. We talked about small things. She told me something funny that had happened at her job. I told her something I'd read. The night was warm enough to sit without a jacket. At some point, she asked me what I was going to do, with the house, with everything. She asked it carefully, like someone who wanted to know, but understood they didn't have the standing to demand an answer. Stay here, I said, for now. Maybe think about that place in South Carolina in a few years. Your mother always said she wanted to go back. My daughter was quiet for a moment. She never told me about it. She didn't tell me either, I said. Not really. She absorbed that. I watched her work through it. The understanding of who her mother had been. The parts of a person that stay hidden not out of secrecy, but out of a kind of contained privacy that is its own form of self. Loretta had been like that her whole life. She held things close. She planned carefully. She said what she meant, and kept what she didn't need to say. She had loved our daughter. She had also seen our daughter clearly, without the softening filter I'd always applied. She had done what she did not because she was punishing anyone, but because she was protecting me, and because she understood that protecting me might someday give my daughter something to grow into, instead of something to take. I don't know if that's how it will go. The future is not something I can see. But I stayed. I'm still here, in the house she bought before I knew her, in the house we made into something together, in the house that is mine now in every way that matters, and also, as it turns out, in the legal sense as well. The deck needs restaining this summer. I'll do it myself. Loretta would have stood at the sliding door and pretended not to supervise, and since she can't do that anymore, I'll have to imagine it. I'm good at that now. Imagining her. It's not the same. It's not nothing either.